interested in doing that. With that, please join me in welcoming, for Mastering Your MarTech Stack with Mark Osborne, Mark Osborne.
Hello. Thanks everybody for coming out. And thanks to Rob and the ECH Group folks for putting everything on. Can everyone hear me okay? See me okay? Does that work? It does. All right, so let's jump right in. So raise your hand if you work in marketing of some kind. So there should be a lot of hands here. Now keep your hand up if you don't have enough time at the end of the day to get to everything that you'd like to get to. So someone will come back up. Now, how many of those things at the end of the day are actually related to technology or customer data or learning new technology or listening to pitches about new technology? Yeah, it's not an uncommon problem. And in fact, sometimes it can feel like it's a bit of a treadmill we can't get off of. You never catch up. There's always more that can be done. And it's really hard to sort of make sense of it. There's always a shiny new object. Your CMO wants you to really look into this or that or the other. And so diving in on these things can be really frustrating. But good news is, I'm here to give you a framework that can actually help solve this and get you off this treadmill so that you can use this to analyze your marketing challenges, your organization, and the technology itself to find the best technology to solve your problems. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight, is a strategic framework for evaluating MarTech. And it starts by evaluating the most important marketing challenge that's facing your organization currently today. Then evaluating your organization's maturity and readiness to take on different types of implementations. And then evaluating the specific technologies, strengths, and the complexity that's required in order to do a good job of fulfilling that technology. So this will give us this framework as we go through tonight. And if we focus on the right solutions to the right problems, we're going to achieve organizational transformation with technology and data. I know you're all excited about that. So a little bit about me, some of the things that Rob mentioned. I have had the privilege of working with a number of world-class brands and seen a lot of the way that they approach technology and data. And so I can give you some of that perspective as it relates to the way that they're approaching some of those issues. But the fact of the matter is that marketers need technology and data. They need it so much that all of these companies have built marketing technology solutions so they can help you. It's 5,000 logos up there, and that's not even all of them. And I'm sure your voicemails are filled with the eager young salespeople who know that their problem's or their solution is going to change your life. This is really just crazy. Like, how do you even start with this? More than 20% of marketers, though, spend a quarter or more on their overall budget on technology. And 10% spend more than half. And I'll wager that some of the brands you admire most are the ones that are on that higher end of the scale. And 70% of marketers expect their expenditures in technology to grow in the next year. Quick show of hands, who thinks they'll spend more this year than they did last year on technology? Yeah, not surprising. But there's a lot of problems. The number one problem, beyond not having enough money to buy everything you'd love to buy, is that 39% of marketers say there's not enough strategy for marketing technology. And the number two problem, which is close behind at 38%, say it's a lack of integration, which is really sort of a symptom of not having strategy. So if we start to think about how do we solve this, we need technology and data, but we need a strategic framework in order to make sense of it and to have success. So it's not easy, but we're going to get there. And the first step in building this framework is understanding your marketing challenge. So if anyone recognizes this guy, it's Marcus Aurelius. He was an emperor in Rome. He was also a Stoic philosopher. And the Stoics had a way of analyzing problems that they called sort of first principles, which they would essentially drill down to the core essence of what is the nature of a thing. If you remember Hannibal Lecter's speech in the Silence of the Lambs, he goes on a little tangent about this, which is sort of interesting. But I started thinking about this structure as marketers. What is the core essence of what we do? What is the first principles of marketing? Fundamentally, we communicate value and facilitate sales. So that's easier said than done, but I wanted to really distill it down into some things that we could wrap our arms around. So I came up with sort of these first principles of marketing. And as marketers, one of the first and foremost things that we do is generate insight. And we really sort of use this insight to drive everything else that we do. So we do research, we use third-party data, we use customer analytics, CRM, DMP database systems so that we can really understand our customers and get insight about them. And that insight then allows us to craft compelling messages so that we can position our products in the mind of our customers. So this is where we make ads, where we make that creative that's really going to cut through the static and change the mind of the consumer. Next, we're focused on delivering those messages efficiently and effectively in the right context to the right people. And this is a lot of where we spend our time as marketers. Advertising, public relations, all of those promotional activities really occupy this space. And not surprisingly, this is where you see a lot of ad tech and MarTech focus. From targeting solutions like contextual or lookalike targeting that are really helping us with delivery, or buying solutions that are helping us to manage bids, or ad servers that sort of handle the technology of delivering things that have been purchased. That lives in this space as well. And even sort of management solutions or measurement solutions like attribution really live in the domain of delivering and then effectively measuring how well we delivered against that. And then finally, as marketers, we're focused on facilitating an exchange of goods and services for money, hopefully to make a profit, so we can afford nice places like this and the beer and wine over in the corner. So we must do all of these things as marketers. But at any given time, there is one of these things that would really be transformational for your business. And oftentimes as marketers, we get distracted by what's the newest thing that came out, and we implement that without thinking about what's the thing we need the most. And are we really focused on the thing that we need the most and finding solutions for that rather than just the latest shiny object? So this framework will sort of help you think through your marketing challenges. And I've also sort of applied this to some sort of classical frameworks that you might have seen, like the Ansoff matrix. So if you've thought about this from sort of a product marketing strategy, you have an existing market with existing products where you're focused on market penetration, or a new market with existing products where you're focused on market development, or new products for your existing market where you're focused on product development, or the dangerous territory of new products for new markets where you're really diversifying. And if you think about, there are different needs in each of these quadrants, whether it's maximizing the exchange and managing sales channels, or looking for technology to help you with effective targeting for delivery as you reach into new markets and try to reach new customers, or find insights from your existing customers, looking at your customer data so that you can find new products that will speak to those same customer segments, or using research data and technology to help you make sense of that as you think about gaining insights for that new market development. Or another framework that you might have seen, Jeffrey Moore's Crossing the Chasm, which is a great book everyone should read, but it has sort of this framework of sort of the product adoption life cycle as you go from innovators through to the laggards. And at each stage where you might be in launching a new product to the marketplace, there are different needs. Whether that need is around insight about your customers, or messaging and testing creative, A/B testing that you might want to test for those early adopters, or media targeting as you get into delivery, or media efficiency as you start to try to reach a wider market, or media optimization as you're now in a less profitable market and you need to be more efficient in your media delivery, or even focusing on that exchange and that sale as you get more repeat sales in sort of a declining marketplace. Another framework we're all familiar with is sort of the sales funnel: awareness, interest, desire, and action. Again, different needs here that you can think about. What is your real marketing challenge that your company is facing at any given time? And for those of you who are staying up on all the latest, we've got a new version of the customer funnel as well, the McKinsey loop. But again, you can see these same sort of needs, the same core principles that we as marketers are focused on, mapped to different stages within the customer journey. And so as you think about how do you do all of these things, you can really distill down what is that core essence of that thing that's going to drive your business more and more. And so as you understand this, this will allow you to know your marketing problem. Now you need to really understand what is the company's maturity. But I've put together this framework for you to sort of generate a score for where each of these ranks in terms of your overall priority. And we're going to talk about this maturity matrix as we go through as well. So the next stage is evaluating the organization's maturity and readiness to take on any given technology. And we all know that if you try to lift more than you're ready for, you can do some damage. And the same thing is true when it comes to taking on marketing technology projects. I've seen many projects sort of stall in first gear before ever crossing the starting line because they bite off more than they can chew. They have really ambitious goals of this transformational technology that they're going to implement, but they haven't thought through the fact that their data lives in a bunch of different silos and they have no idea how they're going to bring it together. And this technology needs that data to all be together. So I'm going to give you a framework for how to evaluate your company's readiness. There's essentially 4 levels of organizational maturity with data and technology. And I developed this based on how different companies approach their governance, leadership, or authority, the way that they approach data ownership, the quality and integration of that data, and the way that they manage decisioning with data and technology for organizational impact. So I'm going to give you some examples of what these 4 levels are and how they vary based on sort of governance, data ownership, and then decision. So in general, level 1 organizations are really focused on sort of an individual channel. So they might have separate leaders, their data might live in silos within those channels, they oftentimes have separate KPIs and measures. So think about like an organization where they measure their display buying team by the CPM they're buying on and their paid search team by their cost per click. Prime example of living in different silos, not being sort of integrated in their approach. So they have separate channel managers, the data lives in silos, and they might be optimizing towards channel-specific objectives and metrics for leading indicators, things like a CPM, but not necessarily even a business outcome. The next phase of this evolution is moving to a cross-channel focus. So now oftentimes we find organizations that are aligned within the marketing team, so that everyone within marketing is focused on that same objective outcome, and they're linking their data to sort of facilitate that. So a cross-channel authority for moving dollars in between different media channels that are performing better or worse. A unified marketing database that begins to bring in both prospect data as well as sort of nurturing data around those customers, and that allows you to move dollars towards accomplishing that overall organizational goal around these outcomes. I see some people taking some pictures. I'm going to share all this information with you later because there's a lot of text here on some of these slides, so don't worry about taking too many notes and getting a hand cramp. The next phase, and this is really where most organizations today really sort of define success, is achieving this customer focus, where the entire organization is making decisions based on the customer. So data might be enriched with third-party sources. The governance within the organization is learning through experimentation. They've got dedicated marketing scientists who are making sense of all this data. The data itself is comprehensive, and it's integrated across both non-marketing and marketing roles. So you might look at both finance and marketing looking at the same outcome for a particular advertising campaign and what's the return on investment for that advertising campaign. And we see decisioning is using predictive analytics so that they're really sophisticated in their approach to making decisions, not just, well, what did we do last year? Should we raise it by 10% or lower it by 10%? And planning and optimization is based on forward-looking projections, not just historical. And as I said, this is where most of the best organizations on earth today actually operate. This customer focus and this customer centricity isn't easy to accomplish because it really requires that you bring a lot of different data sources together, have a very strategic approach to how that data is used, and you break down a lot of walls within the organization to make sure that everyone is making those decisions using that same central guideline of what is truth and what is that sort of source of truth. But we're not going to stop there because there's a future. And the future is this level 4 organization, which is relevancy focused. And in this organization, they're much more agile. Leadership guides decisions based on real-time data, which is still enriched with the same level of sophistication, as we saw in the previous, but it's now so organized that they can make real-time decisions based on agile processes. So governance is data-fueled customer centricity, but focus on the customer not just as a static individual or as an aggregation of all of the data that you have about that customer, but based on their specific context in the moment. And in order to be contextually relevant like that, you have to be using automation. You have to be using predictive technologies, because otherwise there's no way you can adapt fast enough, even if you can stitch your data together. And as it relates to data, not only do you have full access across the organization, but there's a single customer view that has the history, the present, and even their predicted outcomes associated with probabilistic models based on the way that that customer may have come into the organization, and it has a regular timeline for how this is synced and cleansed and all brought together in the way that it integrates across the organization. And then decisions are made based on the customer, not based on the organizational goals, but on what the customer's goals are of getting value from your organization, from the product and service they purchase from you. And programs can adapt to customer preferences within the moment, because this customer insight guides outside just of marketing into product development itself. So the organization is actually building new products based on the insight that they're gaining the way customers go through their marketing funnel. So as you think about these 3 different levels, or 4 different levels, we've got this level 1 channel focus, again, is separate leaders, different metrics, data silos. Level 2, this cross-channel focus, where media and marketing might be aligned, but they're not integrated within the organization overall. They might be working towards different outcomes, like marketing is working towards sales or site visitors, whereas the overall organization is focused on profitability. And then the level 3 customer focus has the whole organization with integrated data. Everyone's tracking against those same metrics, and those models are against the same business outcomes. So if the organization is really focused on profitability, those same models that are driving the customers into the top of the funnel are measuring their predicted profitability, not whether or not they'll convert. And again, this is where most organizations are really striving to be today. But that next level, that next phase, is relevancy. Using that unified, enriched data to feed predictive models for agile responses and regular refinement of those models that are used. So as you think about ranking your organization against these, you can give a score in each of these different areas and add them up so that you can sort of think through from a framework, how mature is your organization? So the final stage within this is around evaluating the technology's strengths and complexity. So this is sort of the fun part. Which technology do we get to use? What's the right technology for us? Now, this is where most people start because someone read an article about the latest DMP or this new attribution technology or this amazing DSP that allows you to target your customers in all these new ways. But this is the third of 3 steps. So if you don't know your organization's primary marketing challenge, you can get distracted by all the new things coming down the pipe. Remember that treadmill. You can never get off of it if you're always chasing the next thing. And the next is knowing your organization's true readiness. Because if you know your sophistication with data, you know your sophistication with governance and decision making, then a little bit of research about a new technology will allow you to say, we're not ready for that. Let's not get distracted by that. Let's play against our playbook so that we can have a strategic approach. However, this is the fun stuff. So I spent some time and I went through 10 very popular marketing technologies. And this is based on a review of Forrester and Gartner and a lot of public information that's available. And I went through website or app analytics like Site Catalyst or Google Analytics, email marketing solutions, CRM, customer prospect databases, social media marketing sort of management platforms or tools, audience targeting solutions like AdRoll and Criteo. I've got 5 more on the next page we'll get to here in a second. And I looked at how each of these score against each of these core dimensions that we as marketers are focused on. Insight, messaging, delivery, and then facilitating an exchange or an actual transaction. And then I even actually generated a score for you, it's really nice. And again, you can see this in the download and take your time to read through it. This is based on sort of the popular belief in the marketplace around these technologies and my own assessment. You may find a particular flavor of a solution that is slightly different in its strengths and weaknesses, but I will challenge you that anytime you're evaluating technology, don't list all the things that it can do. What's the one thing it does really, really well? And know that, first and foremost, as part of your evaluation. It's okay if it also does other things. We're going to talk about that tangential sort of capability as a way of sort of gaining leverage within the organization. But think first and foremost, what from a first principle standpoint is it best at? And is that aligned with what our biggest challenge is today? So the next group that I went through was cross-channel management, attribution, DMPs, real-time optimization or programmatic buying, marketing automation, and website personalization. Now, there were 5,000 logos on that slide that I showed earlier. This by no means is encapsulating even a small proportion of the pie. But it's something we're pretty popular. If you don't have all of these in place, you've probably been thinking about at least one or two of them. Noticeably, I skipped over some of the sort of major infrastructure things like an ad server, which does a lot of different things from insight to messaging, delivery, and facilitating exchange. Some of those are more sort of infrastructure plays that might have more to do with your organization's scale and how big you're growing in terms of when they make sense for you, more so than the problems that you're actually trying to solve. Again, though, there's a case to be made that that's a function of delivery. And so I did the same favor for you where I did some analysis of each of these technologies as where they relate against each of those 4 first principles of marketing, and then distilled those into scores as well, so that you can see just how well each of them does. And again, I would encourage you to do the same assessment because, for starters, there's new vendors in each of these categories since I started speaking tonight. And some of them might be amazing. But again, use the framework of what are they best at. I actually sort of used the example of, oftentimes a lot of these technology tools come from acquisition. Well, they started as a targeting company, and then they bought a creative company, and then they bought an analytics company, and so now they do creative testing. But what are they really best at? What they're best at is delivery, because that's where they started. And so as you think about that framework and evaluating companies, it's going to give you a lot better perspective into what problem do they really solve well. And then I also went through and looked at the complexity involved with each of these different technologies as it relates to how those technologies use data, the type of governance that they demand across an organization, and the integration that's required there, as well as the type of decisioning that goes into play. You can see there's actually quite a bit of variation in terms of how sophisticated each of the different technology requires. Now, I do believe that we're entering the age of what I call the citizen coder, where a lot of things that were once complex will be less complex by the time I finish this talk. So my current scorings may not be relevant. Again, there are vendors out there trying to solution to make this simpler and simpler all the time. And so some of the things that are really complex today will be simpler to solve tomorrow, either because they have built-in APIs with some of the data sources, or built-in APIs with some of the publishing partners that you need to share with, that today would be sort of manual processes and hard for you to accomplish, that in the future may be much easier. But I want to sort of call out, this is sort of a current level of sophistication that would be required to accomplish each of these objectives. So as we think about bringing it all together, so we've got these primary drivers of what is the core problem that they solve. And then what's the sort of complexity that they bring, and what's the maturity that's required by an organization in order to deliver against that? And if we map each of these 10 technologies, you start to see a pretty good framework, and a good framework for decisioning. So if you as a company know that insight is your number one most important driver, that's the thing that will be transformational for your business. If you could fix insight about your customers, it's pretty easy to see a CRM system would be a great place to go. But let's say you've already got a CRM system in place, and the next sort of logical step would be a DMP. Are you ready for a DMP? Because it's much more sophisticated in what it requires. It also facilitates much more sophisticated activities. But so maybe instead of evaluating DMPs, you should be evaluating your organization and thinking about how do we mature with regards to our use of governance, of technology and data? How do we mature with our use of data and integrating it across the organization? Or our use of decisioning with data and technology, so that once we finally implement a DMP, we're going to get the full value out of it, instead of having a really expensive Ferrari but not knowing how to drive. And then you'll also notice that some of these cross into multiple different categories. So remember, as marketers, we do all four of those things, and many, many more. Like, those four principles are really distilling down the core of what we do, but there's a lot of strategies and a lot of tactics that feed into each of those different activities. And where you find technology that accomplish maybe your most important and your second most important, you can really start to achieve real leverage. And a lot of those sort of transformational case studies that you see in here about, well, we implemented this technology, our business grew by 1,000% in 6 months. Those come from people that are picking the most important problem that they had as a business and their second most important problem, and a technology that spanned both of those, where both of those problems were really going to be transformational if they were able to solve. So again, though, by distilling down what's the thing it does best and making sure that aligns, you're really going to achieve the best outcomes overall with your solutions. If you're trying to sort of shoehorn in, well, I really want to do this type of technology, but it solves a problem that's not my most important problem, even if it's your second most important problem, you're never going to achieve that transformational success that's available. So if you do all of this work, you will be a master of the MarTech stack. I couldn't resist using this gift. But it's important to note that there's a lot of work that goes into that, because there's a lot of self-analysis of what is our real marketing problem. Thinking about it from a product market strategy standpoint, from a product adoption standpoint, from the standpoint of the customer journey and where your bottlenecks might be. But by really taking the time to do that analysis of your company, and then that hard look in the mirror of what are we ready for? What data do we have in the right place and in the right position that we can make full use of that data once we have technology that can make sense of it? What are we ready to make decisions against? So that if we had a recommendation to move dollars from here to there, are we really ready to make that decision and move those dollars in order to accomplish a better outcome? Oftentimes you'll find the answer is no, as much as you'd like it to be yes. So rather than spending the money and spending the time on evaluating technology that's going to enable you to do something you're not ready to do, instead you should be championing within the organization, look at these things we could do if we were more mature as an organization and could bring on some of these technologies. So data and technology can be transformative for marketers. Otherwise, all of those different logos on the field wouldn't exist, except that companies are really clamoring for these solutions. And marketers wouldn't be spending this much money on technology if it wasn't delivering these transformative effects. But it requires a strategic framework. And this framework must evaluate your core marketing needs using first principles. Do you need insight about your customers or the marketplace at large? Do you need help with your messaging, whether it's delivering that messaging, targeting that messaging, managing and optimizing it? Or do you need help facilitating an exchange? So generating more sales or generating sales more efficiently, using data about your customers to feed phone call or call center scripts to do a better job of running them. But if you know the first principles of your marketing challenge, And then you evaluate your organization's maturity against how you govern and make decisions, how you use data with technology. And then evaluate technology against those same dimensions. You can find a perfect fit that really will deliver that transformational experience that marketers are looking for with technology and data. So I know that was a lot of information in a short period of time. Again, all of that information I'll make available for download so that you can go through some of that assessment that I did of how to score your organization in terms of your sophistication with governance, sophistication with data, and decision making, as well as sort of my assessment of each of those technologies. But I'm happy to entertain any questions or any discussion that we would like to go through tonight. Who has a question?
I have a question. Just in your experience with different companies, siloed organizations, there's typically one group that's kind of out in front of they're the pioneers, right? They've got the best talent, or they're spent the most, or most cutting edge. Can you speak to that in organizations and how you pull the rest of the organization up, or how you catch up if you're in a different department that's maybe laggard?
So let me make sure that I understand the question so that I can answer it correctly. So within an organization, there's a particular team that's more sophisticated with their use of technology, and you want to spread that sophistication across the organization?
Yeah, and I'm thinking more than just marketing, right? I mean,
Yeah.
there's finance analytics, there's other areas where they have data scientists or teams that are trying to have that customer insight.
Yeah. So there's a number of best practices in terms of, fundamentally you're talking about change management.
Right.
And that's one of the things that, good ideas don't sell themselves, unfortunately, or we'd all be driving electric cars. And so fundamentally that type of change management needs a champion. And then there are some pretty well proven, sort of paths to success there. And they sort of stem around having a champion that can paint a vision of what's the benefit if we go through the hard work. And then the sort of iterative process is establishing a quick win so that you can now prove what the benefit of that initial hard work is, which then allows you to build momentum and then sort of span across the organization. I have actually seen it be successful from almost like a bowling pin strategy, and I'm borrowing that from Crossing the Chasm, but where you identify like, what's one small problem that I could solve by bringing data and technology to bear, but that problem is closely related to some much larger problems. So it'd be very easy for an organization to see, wow, so getting our data house in order, and then bringing technology to make sense of that data, allowing us to solve this problem, and it's really easy to see logically how that would extend all these other problems. Now you have sort of a groundswell for, let's do it for all these other things too, which then gives you the ability to get much more integrated in your approach to data, because those other bowling pins might be in very disparate groups within the organization, which allows you to take a really strategic step back, get much more sophisticated in your approach. Is that helpful?
No, it is. Because a lot of times it's about trust and access to data from other areas of the organization.
Yeah, and again, the thing that I've seen not be successful is sort of an autocratic top-down, you will give access to this data. Sometimes there is, sort of the necessity of someone who has the authority, again, governance, with that sort of level of sophistication. And in fact, in the way that I built that scoring mechanism, you can't be more sophisticated at a level below than you are at the one above. Because if you don't have leadership and vision for how you're using data, then no matter what level of sophistication you have with data, you can't accomplish all that you can do there. But so having someone who has that vision and can lay it out, but then also have the authority to say, we need to be sharing this. Let's pull down some of the walls between these silos. Yeah, of course.
How often do you find, in the data governance step, when you come in and you try to apply some data governance to an organization, and we don't like this, suddenly our access is restricted, we can't create all the tables and procedures we want, we can't be as flexible as we were in the past. We get it that you're putting structure here, but at the same time, how do you maintain any kind of flexibility with that? I feel like that would be a challenge.
Yeah, it is a challenge. And here's sort of what's the driver of that challenge is the data was originally sort of a lot of it was kind of generated on accident. And then people started realizing, oh, this is sort of a byproduct of buying ads that we can know what device they were on. It's a byproduct of buying ads that we can know where the impression was served for that ad. And so they sort of anecdotally started capturing these attributes, but they weren't disciplined in the way that they were capturing it. And in a really fast period of time, what you could do with that data became really sophisticated and became the state of the art. So everyone sort of started demanding it. And so it's a little bit of a whiplash for these organizations that are like, well, we don't really have a regulated approach to how we capture device data or how we capture location data. And so because they've never been enforced on them, when someone comes in and is like, oh, you're not capturing device data, you don't know what you're doing. And it starts to sort of put these strictures down, then they start going, well, what was my data to begin with? And it sort of starts to create these silos. So what I have found, though, as sort of a solution within these organizations is a little bit of that same strategy of paint the vision. What's going to be available, rather than sort of the critique, start with the optimism of what can be accomplished once we have this integration across different data types, and then start to sort of build the rapport of, so now you're going to share your data, and then start to say, well, we could do these really awesome things if there was a little bit more structure. And the other thing that we've sort of had to do oftentimes is approach it as a phase. What can you do today? What can you add value with if they go, oh, that's really cool. And then you go, that's the tip of the iceberg. There's all these other things we could do if you brought in this other level of sort of discipline to the way that you approach the data. And then they start to see that value. It delays the timeline for sort of receiving that value, but it builds more adoption and it starts to snowball as you go through. Is that helpful?
Yeah, no, thank you.
So Mark, I know in the early days of ERP, there was a pretty high failure rate on implementations of these systems, and some of them were large and massively spectacular failures. Have you seen any research on what is the success rate for some of the MarTech implementations recently?
I have. So, in fact, in the original version of this, I had some of that. I'm not going to remember it well off the top of my head, but I know some of it exists. What I do remember is sort of the really stark dichotomy between, like, there's some group of about 20%, if I'm remembering correctly, of marketers that are, marketing technology is completely transformative. It's unbelievable. It changed my life. And then there's like very little in the middle of people who are like, it's pretty good. But then there's the other 80% of people who are like, this is a waste of time, it's terrible, none of the promises have been paid off by the marketing technology. And my belief, and in fact, it was those statistics that actually led me down this path. My belief is that what's causing that is people picking the wrong technology for the problem they have, or picking the wrong technology for the maturity level that they're at. Because they get excited about the promise of this technology that actually would work in the way it's described if that was a problem you had, and if you were ready to do the things that that technology requires that you can do.
We see an awful lot of people on that treadmill you saw. It's like, stop,
Yeah.
go back, let's see what you really need first.
Yeah, I was going to ask, are there any new technologies that you're excited about, given you have a good filter for such things?
Strategic technologies?
Yes.
What is your marketing problem?